that all men have inalienable rights to think freely, to talk freely, to write freely their own opinions, and to counter or utter or write upon the opinions of others.
This is from the Creed of the Church of Scientology.
Hey everybody, I'm Holly, aka the ScientoloGeek, and I am here once again with the great, the very awesome Chris Shelton. Today we are
Hello.
going to be covering statistical management and the culture of statistical management. He has a ton of information on it, having worked at the CLO West US, as well as having worked, I'm trying to remember, you worked at the Mission, or did you work at a Class 5?
Class 5, Santa Barbara.
Okay, cool. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your history in management for those who are unaware?
Totally. So, yeah, not born, but raised with Scientology. Second gen, joined staff, started working for the church when I was 17 years old. Worked at the Santa Barbara church and then worked in the Sea Org for another 17 years. And when I was in the Sea Org, which I started doing when I was 25 years old, I went right to management. And that's one of the functions that the Sea Org has for Scientology is it manages the various churches and missions and groups of Scientology and is constantly pushing for more and more expansion. That's the whole reason management exists, is to get Scientology bigger. And so I did that for the first 8 or 9 years that I was in the Sea Org. I was working in management. And I was specifically overseeing the delivery of Scientology in the Western United States. So if it happened in a classroom or an auditing room, if it was, had to do with the statistics or the personnel or, or anything having to do with that, that came up to me. That was my responsibility.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Uh, so I guess my first question would be, I gotta kind of act like a complete don't know shit. So what is statistical management? Like, how did it begin, and why does Scientology do it?
Oh, yeah. Hubbard came up with the system in the mid 1960s, along with the idea. Although, actually, I think, yeah, it was in the 60s, because what he did was he implemented a management system for Scientology internationally. And he ran Scientology from St. Hill in England. That was the sort of international base through the 1960s for Scientology. And Hubbard set up a telex system, a reporting system that was pretty much instant. I mean, it was pretty fast, and for the 1960s, that was kind of amazing. And using that very fast communication system, every week Hubbard set up that the week's production would be measured from a certain daytime, Thursday at 2 o'clock, to the following Thursday at 2 o'clock. That's the production week that you measure. And then a new week starts and you begin all over again at zero. And here we go. Scientology organizations are, well, we don't have to get into all the schedules and all that stuff right now. It's just a system of measuring production. And by reporting, by creating numbers to reflect the production of any job in Scientology, Hubbard envisioned that there would be, or at least this is how he presented it, that it would be an objective, unbiased look at how productive you as a staff member are. And at the end of the day, as a staff member, your production is your value. If you're not producing, you're not valuable to the organization. That's not to say, and Scientologists would be the first to say, well, that doesn't mean you don't have any value as a human being. But that's not actually how it works in that culture. It is all about you are your statistic, and you are made to do various. What went along with this was a set of steps that you have to take depending on whether your numbers are up or down or not every week. And those steps are punitive and sometimes even abusive. In fact, many times abusively executed, right? Because there's punishments and having to go above and beyond and various things that you have to do, which we can get into. But the overview is that the numbers are supposed to be objective and inarguable. And so, people readily agree to this system, not realizing how those numbers are going to be used to abuse them.
A lot of businesses I've noticed use quarterly, monthly, annual statistics. Why weekly?
See, that's the thing. That's a great question, because that's exactly where it starts becoming psychotic, or maybe neurotic, whatever word you want to use for insane. It was because it's too short a time period. You are crunched into constantly thinking as a staff member only 1 week ahead. If something is going to get you expansion, but it's a month away, this culture of how the statistics are used and how the Scientology organizations are actually run. I'm not talking theory now. I'm talking about how it really happens. The way it really happens is you don't have any time or attention for 3 weeks, 4 weeks from now, because all of your attention is being focused on the right here this week. And this is how Hubbard creates a kind of double bind. I love pointing these things out in Scientology, these massive contradictions, where he sets up all the staff with policies and issues that advise them, and they repeat these mantras: think in futures, think big, and think in futures. Those are the two big mantras for staff. But how can you think in futures when you're stuck in a 1 week neurotic cycle that you can't ever get out of, because you can't plan for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? All the demand from the executives and from management on down is this week's production. It seems like it would be like, I put it that way, and it's like, well, why don't they just, not do that? And it's like, well, because the entire culture of Scientology and management is built to not do that. It's built to keep it psychotic. And that's the system that they use, basically, is these statistics.
What is the motivation for keeping one's statistics up? What happens if someone is, as they say, down stat?
Yeah. So what happens is if you sign up for staff, you are going to be assigned a job that has statistics connected with it, often more than one. You'll have a main statistic, and then and there's a whole theory to this, which we can get into later maybe, but there's a thing about major statistics and minor statistics, or what they call sub-statistics. And there's a whole thing to this, right? It's quite a developed thing in Scientology, right? I'm sort of slapdashing quick answers out here, but there's volumes on this. I mean, there's pages and pages and pages of writings about keeping statistics, measuring them, and the discipline that follows from how to get them up or down. So you are, as you mentioned, right, you're either at the end of the week, your numbers are either up, the same, or down. They can't, those are the only three options. And if they are up, there's a certain set of actions you will take. If they are level, there's a different set of actions. And if they are down, there's a whole nother set of actions. And the slant of the line on the graph is actually what determines what set of steps you're going to do. Those are called condition formulas. These formulas. I don't know why Hubbard uses that word, because it's really just a set of steps that you take. It's not a formula. Like, it's this weird idea that if you do these steps, you can't help but turn the statistic up, or if it's up, keep it going up. This is the magic formula in Scientology, is these condition formulas, and they're generalized statements of steps to take that are so general that they don't ensure success at all. And so it just is kind of this, it becomes almost an admin exercise, a sort of academic exercise, doing these steps week after week after week. But again, I'm probably getting ahead of myself. You have to do these steps, and by doing them, you're supposed to raise the statistic. And if the stat is going down, that's the wrong direction. And if it keeps going down week after week after week, you could find yourself receiving harsh discipline, and Scientology ethics will be applied to you. there's a lot to this. So I'm just kind of trying to navigate the simple explanations of this, but there's so much to it. So,
what was your initial opinion when you first joined staff? I don't know if you had one about the statistical management system.
I thought it was a workable system. Hubbard wrote an issue that kind of gives you that phrase, actually, a workable system. It's not some Scientologies, but it's a funny phrase, because Hubbard says it's not perfect. It's workable. It works. It gets you the result you want. And of course, he does insist that it's perfect in that it gets you the result 100% of the time if you follow the steps properly. This is the subtext to every single thing in Scientology. Hubbard's philosophical foundation for this is that there is one right way to do anything. And that one right way is what Scientology is. So you could have a million different variations of how to do it wrong or how to do it non-optimally, or there's the optimum right way to do something. And so Hubbard envisioned that when it came to running organizations, businesses, you need to take all the opinion and the bias out. And a way to do that is to staticize it. Just use raw, harsh, logical, unarguable numbers. Fine, that measures production. But what then happens is another philosophical foundational point of Scientology that ruins this whole thing is you are always responsible for your own condition. Always and inexorably, you are responsible. It doesn't matter whether Hurricane Helene came in and crashed out the walls of the HGC, of the guy, the auditing area. At the end of the week, if those statistics are not up, it's because you didn't plan for it and make it go right. That's on you. There is no active God. There is no other thing that is responsible for your job. And Hubbard's policies about staff and responsibility are crystal clear about this. So there's it's a very binary way of thinking. It's very off-on, black and white. There's no nuance here. So no one cares whether the delivery truck didn't arrive on time, or your pre-clear got sick, or the student, couldn't show up because he had to work overtime that night when he was scheduled to come into course and finish. No one cares about your excuses. You didn't get the numbers up. And that's on you. So that's a kind of an important point to stress, because it's rampant throughout Scientology, that this personal responsibility point. And it's obvious, I think, from the way that I'm describing it, I hope, how ridiculously exaggerated this is. It's unrealistic. It's beyond. But people in Scientology don't care, because they believe truly that you are capable of producing or causing anything you want, because you're a powerful spiritual being, right? It really does come back down to those kind of things. The statistical system could be used non-abusively, but it's not in Scientology. It's used abusively, and these principles are the reasons why. So, for example, you arrange everything and things, kind of fall apart, and the statistic goes down. Let's say, you're a course room supervisor like I was, and you're running a classroom, and your statistics as a supervisor, as a classroom teacher, are the number of people who are completing courses that week, and the number of, and the production of the students as a whole, their progress through their courses. And this is measured with a point system. Every student keeps track of their progress with points. They're assigned points. And so the public Scientologists who are on courses also have a statistic. and are also measured every day up, level, or down. And they're supposed to be learning and producing and progressing more and more and more on their courses every single time. Statistics are supposed to be going up, up, up. So even the public are at the receiving end of this statistical nonsense. But let's say that I'm a course supervisor and I have 5 students lined up to complete courses this week, and I'm quoted for 100,000 student points. And for some reason, there's a massive storm, as happens all over the US right now, all over the world. And, you know, the place shuts down for a day or two, right? Statistic down. Can't help it. There's no way to get it up in a situation like that. Well, I'm now going to be doing what's called a danger condition, because the statistic went down. In fact, it was way down. It wasn't, if it goes down so steeply that it looks near vertical, that's an even worse condition called non-existence, where you basically just stopped existing on your post. You might as well have not even been there. And you have to do these steps to reestablish yourself as though you're newly there or figuring out what to do. It's a little ridiculous and a little childlike, to be honest. The danger condition, where it's not so steep, where it's down, but it's not like, you know, out the bottom, calls for 4 simple steps. Let's see if I can remember them. Bypass habits, normal routines, assign yourself a danger condition, find out what you're doing that is out ethics, and use self-discipline to correct it and get honest and straight, and then formulate and adopt firm policy that will hereafter detect and prevent the same situation from continuing to occur.
And you just got all that off the top of your head right now. Holy, I'm looking at the first dynamic danger formula. The only thing that you missed, reorganize your life so that the dangerous situation is not continually happening to you.
Thank you. Yeah. There you go. So yeah, it's been a few years, but I wrote that thing. I wrote those down over and over again for years, these condition formulas, because every week you plan your next week's actions based on this condition formula that you're applying to your statistics. So your actions for the next week are laid out by doing these steps, and you have to figure out how those very generalized steps apply to your job. Bypass habits or normal routines. Well, okay, stat went way down. I guess I can't just do the usual. I have to do something above and beyond. I can't just, you know, do my standard stuff. I have to assign myself a danger condition just so I don't forget I'm in danger. That is literally the reason that step is there. Again, this is childlike, right? But the key steps here are, it is assumed that if this condition, this is where it gets personal and weird and abusive. It is assumed that if your statistic went down in a danger trend, like it's called, or a danger line, that you're out ethics. That you, and that's a term in Scientology for you are acting immorally. You are doing bad stuff. You're out ethics. You're not towing the line. You're being a bad boy or a bad girl. And you need correction. You need discipline. You need to get straightened up on that. So you're supposed to figure out, no matter why it is that your statistic went down, you're supposed to sit there at your desk at the beginning of the week and figure out why it is you're such a bad person. You have to decide, you have to figure out and write down what your out ethics situation is, and then do these steps to stop being out ethics. It's just assume this is the case. And no one's going to believe you if you go, look, it was just a hurricane. Yeah, no, nope. Not hearing it. I don't want to hear it because you're personally responsible.
The why is not God.
Bang. Exactly. You're quoting policy at me. Exactly right. There is a policy letter called The Why is God. And Hubbard completely rejects that there is any reason in that policy letter, like I mentioned earlier, any reason at all that is outside of your control. There is never an external reason. So you have to sit at your desk and figure your way through what it is that you're so out ethics about. And if that requires you to, and often this is accompanied by an ethics officer coming around and digging into you and putting you on the meter and putting you into an ethics interview to really help you find out what your out ethics situation is. Because there's going to be one, there has to be one. There can't not be one. And so they're going to dig and dig and dig, and they're going to make you do an overt withhold write-up, right, which I'm sure you've covered on your channel before, and, write down all your misdeeds, confess to all your sins. So it becomes this whole personal exercise. And this is the third principle that I wanted to sort of point out here that is so important in how Scientology organizations are run specifically. Maybe Scientologists and other people who use the statistical system don't do this outside of the churches, but I'm pretty sure they do too. Because it's the whole theme of Scientology. Personal responsibility. It's not about the conditions of your job or other people or other factors. It always comes back down to you. You become your job. You are identified with your job. You are your job. If your statistics go down, you suck. And if your statistics are trending down, your credibility and reputation in the organization as a human being goes down and down and down. People look at you funny. They don't like you. They don't want to be around you. You're kind of, because you're down stat. These labels get put on you. So there's a lot of personal judgment that goes along with this personal responsibility business. And that's not how, businesses or organizations should be run. That Hubbard presents this thing as this unbiased system of management, and then introduces more bias and judgment into the culture of this. And so again, it's just kind of a weird, contradictory, hypocritical double bind, right? That's just cults.
I was thinking about when you have to go through conditions formulas. How long does that take, and wouldn't that lead to a constant cycle of lower and lower stats due to the fact that you're not spending that time being productive, but now you're looking for the problem?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And this is how people get removed from posts and busted off of their posts and have to be replaced and all kinds of stuff. Because different people will have different reactions to this. Some people take to it and accept full responsibility for their posts, and other people, they just struggle with this. It's really a hellacious little system. You are expected to work, let's just say, overtime to make up for any lack of your production. Part of the bypass habits and normal routines, for example, of step 1 of the danger condition could well be a demand from your senior. Okay, you're doing the danger formula this week. Yes, I am. Okay, good. I want your OWs, your overt withhold write-up, your confessions. I want that by the end of the weekend. It's Thursday at like 3 o'clock right now, and we're having this conversation, right? And I'm the senior, and I'm saying to you who are in the danger condition, I want your OWs by end of Saturday night. And I want your full condition write-up and handling and plan for your statistics. I mean, there's the condition formula, but then there's also, I want the names of everybody who's completing this week. And I want the breakdown day by day of how they're going to get their course completed. This was pretty typical. This is week to week. This is how it runs. And some of these demands are not particularly unreasonable, but you are expected to have that done today. And if you have to be here until 2 a.m. figuring that out, because you're not going to do this while you're doing your job, you're supervising. That means you're working with the students. So that means you have to stay late tonight to get the figure out done for your statistics for the week. So I see all the completions lined up, and I am convinced by your write-up that these things are absolutely going to happen this week because you didn't make it happen last week. So this is what I have to do now is I have to run you, right? This is the language they would use. And so, so I'm going to be checking on you, every few hours now. Maybe last week as a senior, I was giving you a lot of latitude. I was off handling other things. And then you crashed your statistics this week. So now I got to pay attention to your sorry downstat ass. So here we go, right? So I'm going to micromanage you now. And I want the OWs by Saturday. I want your out ethics handled by Saturday, and I want this condition formula actually done and the statistics turning around before the end of the weekend. So basically, you've got till Sunday to get your stats up over last week ending, or I'm not going to be convinced that you're actually on top of this situation. And that's a very, very typical senior-junior conversation in Scientology.
So now you're ending up with more sleep deprivation, less of an ability to do your job, hence probably lower statistics, and even more fucked.
Over time, that is absolutely what happens. You can kick somebody in the ass and get them going, but you do this over and over and over. If this was just a one-off, maybe once a year or twice a year or something, like some kind of rare thing that didn't really happen very often, then maybe you could understand somebody having to burn some midnight oil, having to put in a little bit of overtime to get things under control or get things reorganized or something. This is, I don't see that as outrageous, but that ain't what this situation is. Let me be really clear. Exactly like you just said, this is week after week after week after week. And your statistic might go up one week, beep, and then down again, right? Okay, here we go again, right? And then you manage to pull it up a little bit, right? But then, that's how it can go. And there can be a lot of different reasons for that, but the why can never be God, right? Those reasons always have to come back to you. And that's one of the ways that they self-sabotage, because they will not ever recognize external causation for problems or issues. And this is a control mechanism. It sounds crazy and very, very stupid, but it's actually by design. They want you, Hubbard and management, want the staff right on the razor's edge. You know what I mean? They want them like always just giving their all. The other thing about this that differentiates it from businesses, of course, is that these are people who are on a religious crusade. So, putting in the extra time and all that is absolutely expected. So when I was a staff member, for example, the 8 years that I was in Santa Barbara, even before I got up to the Sea Org and the craziness of management, all-nighters were pretty routine. And that wears on you over time. I had a young body back then. I was in my 20s. I could put up with a lot. And even then, there were days where I crashed. Absolutely crashed. Fell asleep at my desk, crashed, it was not a fun 8 years. And of course, what this also does, just psychologically speaking and physiologically speaking, when you stress people out like this, keep them on a short leash of week to week to week, no future planning, no future thinking, even though you keep telling them to think in futures, but then you don't let them do it. You run this condition thing on them every week where they're made personally wrong as a person, as a being, for their statistics. So very, very quickly, you kind of learn to, you kind of identify with your post, and that's unhealthy, with your job, right? And then you have the sleep deprivation. And this is a mandated kind of enforced thing. If you're not pulling your weight and keeping those statistics up, then you're in trouble. And there's no other word for it. You are in trouble. And you better get your ass in gear in the first week, because if you're down stat for 2 weeks in a row, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, you are in so much trouble. You're literally in, like you can get kicked out. Like it's like you could be starting to be, people could start looking at you as though you mean to drive the statistics down.
Your PTS.
Oh, PTS, SP, all of it, right? I mean, Hubbard talks about how you look for the people who crash statistics. That's your SP, right? So you start getting down statistics, and the rest of the staff start looking at you. Your own friends start looking at you sideways. Are you really here on the same terms as the rest of us? I mean, it starts getting paranoid and weird. I swear to God, it really is like that. It's crazy town in there. So, yeah. So anyway, that's kind of how that goes.
I was thinking about the ethics handlings and stuff like that. I would say, let's say you don't have any OWs to write up, but apparently that's not the fucking case. How does
that will never be acceptable?
How does that correlate to someone who, say, isn't doing their job right because, just as example, an MU? Instead of having ethical problems, they just don't understand and they need a cramming order.
So theoretically, there's a division in Scientology. Yeah, theoretically, there is a division in Scientology organizations called the Qualifications Division. And within that division, there is a department called the Department of Cramming or Correction. And the DIR correction, the director of correction, is responsible for correcting staff members who are not understanding or doing their job properly. It's not ethics, it's correction. It's let's see what you didn't understand in your materials. Let's see what other coursework do you need or training do you need to be able to do your job better. That's the job of the director of correction and the qualifications division, is to train the staff and to correct them when they are demonstrating that they don't know what they're doing on their job. And that would be demonstrated by down statistics or messing up or making mistakes and stuff like that. Very rarely is there a DIR correction on post. Cramming, the thing you just referred to, is the action of correcting a staff member or a Scientologist who isn't getting something right. They call it cramming. They're going to cram you. You trained on this, but you didn't get it, so now we're going to cram you and get whatever it is you didn't get and get you back into, production. Staff members can get crammed, and some staff get crammed all the time when there are cramming officers. Because it's a whole kind of thing. It's not just somebody walks up to you and goes, oh, well, let's just go through your materials here. Let's see. What's the definition of the word recurrent? Gotcha, right? It doesn't work like that. They actually have to put you on the meter and interview you and talk about your job and all that and try to isolate the exact areas that you're having problems with. So if it worked and it was done, that'd be wonderful. But we already know Scientology doesn't really do a good job of training people. And the whole misunderstood word thing is a little bit silly. And so this cramming thing is sort of a token. Let's put it that way. It's a token. The ethics and the conditions is what are used 90% of the time. Let's say 95% of the time to correct discipline a staff member versus the cramming. Go on.
I had always thought that if there were empty spots on the org board, other people from that department or division would take those posts as well as their own.
No, it's supposed to be held from above. The responsibility goes upwards on the organizing board. So if there is no cramming officer, then the DIR correction, if there's a DIR correction, everything under them they're responsible for. If there is no DIR correction, it goes up to the next level, which is the qualifications secretary, who is responsible for that entire department and anything else going on, right? And if there's no qualifications secretary, the duty rolls on up to the org executive secretary, the OES. And if there's no OES, it's the ED's job.
If you have this tiny little podunk failing org and you have so few staff on it, how many stats is the those department division heads, whatever, how many stats are they trying to now hold?
Oh, a lot. There's every class 5 org, every local city level church of Scientology has something like, when I was managing, and of course, you know, the statistics do change, but the major ones don't. They've been steady Eddie for decades. Like the student points, for example, that's not going anywhere, right? Student completions, that's just too obvious of a statistic to need to change it to something else. So there might have been a few changes here and there since I left, but for the most part, orgs were responsible for reporting to management. I think it was something about 109 statistics, something like that, 119. There were quite a few. Out of over the 7 divisions of a Scientology organizing board, all the different statistics that get reported on up the line, I think it totals to about that. This is the thing with all staff. Every staff member does this every week, Thursday at 2, boom. Everybody kind of stops what they're doing. And the entire afternoon is spent on planning out your next week. Thursday is kind of a big day in the Scientology org. You're flat out. Everybody comes in pretty early, or at least on time, and works flat out. There's no lunch breaks on Thursdays, right? And they go till 2 o'clock. And at the end of the week, okay, the bell rings, the statistics are done for the week. Everybody stop, add up your statistics, log them on the stat log. There's literally a clipboard, right, where they'll go report their end of the week statistics. And those get telexed up to management. While that's all happening, the management body of the local church, the executive director and his immediate subordinates, coordinate at a couple different meetings the plan of attack for the new week based on the org statistics from the last week. They do their own planning at the organizational level for what they're going to do as a body, as an organization moving forward for the next week. That's the ED's job with what's called the Executive Council. And the division heads also are part of that with what's called Advisory Council. So they have these 2 meetings. They go for hours. They go through all the statistics. They come up with a battle plan, they call it, a list of things to do for the new week. For the whole organization, everybody, this is what we're doing this week, right? And they lay all that out. That usually takes until well into the evening. And then they have a staff meeting at the end of the night, and they are supposed to brief everybody on the plan for the new week and go over what happened over the last week. Emergencies, flaps, handlings, all that kind of crap. And they go over all the statistics. Everybody gets to see everybody else's statistics on Thursday night. So there's this sort of coordination happening and everybody kind of knows what's up. This is whether there's 5 staff or 50. This is how it's supposed to run on Thursdays. So not a lot of work is usually getting done on Thursdays, at least in the afternoon and early evening part, because there's all this beginning of the week planning and stuff going on. That's kind of how it goes. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's usually how it goes in terms of organizing and prepping those things.
Okay, so you have the head of a division or the head of a department, whatever, having to oversee all of the sub-statistics of that division or department. But by doing that, I had originally thought that they were abandoning their own post statistics by working on somebody else's.
Got it. Okay, good. Yeah, quite simply, the statistics are supposed to all add up and flow upwards. If I'm a course room supervisor, I'm not a div head. I'm a course room supervisor, right? I'm a lowly little guy stuck in a course room all the time, and the technical secretary is the head of the division that runs all of the classes and all the auditing. So the course room supervisor has the statistics of student points from his students and completions from his course room. The technical secretary is operating on the total student points for all the classrooms, and the number of hours of auditing that are delivered in by the auditors, total, all the hours of all the auditing, that adds up to another statistic, and what's called the VSD, value of services delivered, which is the monetary amount of completed services. So, for example, a course costs $500. And Joe Blow finishes that course this week. Well, that's one course completion, but it's $500 of VSD. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Auditing is sold in 12.5-hour chunks, called an intensive. When you complete an intensive, that's a statistic. It's called an INCO, intensive completed. And you push for completed intensives. Well, the only way you can get completed intensives is hours of auditing delivered. So you need an auditor, you need a pre-clear, you need to stick them in session and get them going for hours, and that will get you your INCO. And you don't get to count the value of service delivered on those hours until they complete the full intensive. Then you get to count however much they paid for that intensive, usually around $3,200. So your VSD from a completed intensive is $3,200. So by pushing for hours and by pushing to get pre-clears in session, you are automatically producing the higher statistics. Do you see what I mean? It all flows upwards, and the statistics have been put together in such a way that one contributes to the next one up, and that kind of thing. I hope I'm explaining that well. It's a whole system, but that's kind of how it works.
No, you're explaining it just fine. I promise.
Okay. Okay. I'm trying to keep it simple because there's just so much to this.
So this is going into your own personal experiences. What was the most common condition you found yourself in week to week at the class 5 level?
That's a good question. I was on staff for 8 years, and I had a number of different jobs during that time. Conditions-wise, man, what I remember more often than not, of course, is the down statistics, because that's when the trauma and the abuse came in, right? I mean, so I'm a little, I might have some, memory bias in that direction, but I sure was in lower conditions a lot, right? Here's the other thing about this. Okay, I said 3 things so far that are kind of really crappy about this system that kind of cause it to fail. And there is this other thing too. So let's say 4. I didn't write all this down before I came in, but the more I think about these things, the more I realize these pillars of failure that this system lies on. Permanent. You can't week to week to week to week to week. You can't always just have up statistics. Hubbard even acknowledges it in policy. You're going to hit a ceiling, and it doesn't take that long. Once you kind of figure out your job, within about 2 or 3 weeks, you're balls to the wall. You're trying to figure out how to produce, and you're producing as most as you can. And people in Scientology churches on their jobs are not slackers. Oh. They're Scientologists on a religious crusade. You know what I mean? They're hard workers. These are people who are really dedicated to the work. They're not doing it for the money.
Yeah,
we know that. Yeah, we definitely know that. Nobody in Scientology is there for the money, except David Miscavige. So these are hardworking people, and they are very earnest and sincere. But they're not capable of being upstat week after week after week after week after week. Eventually, you're going to hit a level, or it's going to go down, and then you're going to end up in trouble, and then you're suddenly like, what the hell is going on here? How is this all my fault, right? And you have to kind of be broken into this system where, no, it is your fault, and you are going to take responsibility for this, and this is what it means to hold a job in a Scientology organization, and this entire group is going to look down on you until you get your, and sometimes there is no way to get the statistic up, and you're just fucked, and I've been talking mainly about students and pre-clears, but there's money in, there's bodies in the shop, there is book sales. I mean, all of this is statusized. And if you happened to get in a whale last week and you sold a $50,000 package, And it took you, let's say you were one of these staff who were a super person, and you were able to develop a cycle that took you 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, and you finally pull it off, and you get your big $50,000 income week. Well, it took you 4 weeks of really dedicated effort to pull that off once. So now you're going to repeat that? Because here's the thing, now you've got this great big statistic that goes up. And it's not a danger condition, it's what's called an affluence condition. And you're expected to do it again. And again, and again, and again. And of course, you're not going to. Maybe you pull it off once, maybe you pull it off twice. And then suddenly you're sitting in a room with a ream of paper writing your OWs because somehow you couldn't do it 3 times, right? And it's all your fault. And this is sort of this cycle of blame that happens to every single staff member, and they just become inured to it. It becomes routine. It becomes normalized because everybody in the staff, everybody does this. So if you don't get in line and agree to this way of thinking and this way of acting, then you're the odd man out, and you probably won't make it as a staff member.
I had spoken with a former cramming officer a little bit ago about this statistic stuff, and he mentioned how he had a habit of not faking his statistics, but let's say he has 20 crams to do. His statistic last week was 12. So he does 13 this week and saves 7 for the following week. So he doesn't fuck himself over.
You got it. Absolutely. Survival skill for a staff member. You save, you reserve things. Absolutely. Did that all the time. You just develop these little things. And again, it becomes counterproductive, doesn't it? Right? Because you could have produced 20, but you dare not.
Because then you have to produce 21.
That's right. And you know you're not going to pull that off, right? But if you got 7 in the bag, you start off on Friday. Look at me. This week is going great, right? You could have had it all on Thursday at 2, but yeah, absolutely. And dare I get into this, but false statistics are very common.
About it. Please tell me more.
Very, very common, especially out of LA org.
Why is that?
I don't know, but that place was like the false statistic, like Hall of Fame. I mean, I could not believe how many false statistics came out of LA org. They would just come in waves. You know, there would just be like these waves. This was mostly when I was in management, right? So I'm in management for many, many years, overseeing the statistics of all these different Scientology churches all over the West US. There are 34 of them, including the Sea orgs, right? ASHO and AO. So every week we get these stats in, and sometimes there would be situations where you would see an org or a division of an org or an area, and it was just up, 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 and up. And after a while, you start going, okay, because you can compare statistics one to the other. And this is actually one of the things that you're trained to do as a manager. One of the arts of being a Scientology manager is learning how to read these statistics. You have a book of them that you're given every week for an org, and it gives you a picture of the org. If you look through an org stat book, you can get a pretty good idea of what happened there. But by comparing one set of graphs to another from division to division, you can see irregularities and inconsistencies. If the number of public on service that week, it's a statistic called bodies in the shop, BIS, really important statistic for Scientology, because it literally measures how many people are doing Scientology that week in your church. On service, paid for a service. That's what a BIS is. It can't just be somebody who wanders in and takes a test. They got to be on a paid service. So BIS was an important number. And generally speaking, for Scientology churches, it runs somewhere between 25 to 50 every week. That's about how many, 50 is a pretty good sized BIS for a Scientology church. That's 50 different people coming in a 7-day period on paid services. That's a lot. A huge BIS for a Scientology church is anything over 100. That's a whole lot. That's a very successful Scientology church. I think if you counted how many people went into a McDonald's on any day of the week, they would smoke any Scientology church, hands down, right? But I'm just throwing some numbers around. The reason BIS is important is because if it goes way down, or if it's kind of not going anywhere, and the student points and the student completions are going up, week after week after week, we got a problem. Who's producing all those student points if the number of people in the org keeps going down? And the number of people coming into the shop is not a Division 4 statistic, it's a Division 6 statistic. So the tech guys don't get to control or report that statistic. They only get to report their own statistics. So if they're false reporting, the other statistics in the organization, like the gross income and the BIS and certain other ones, will kind of indicate to you, this is an anomaly. This statistic doesn't make sense that it keeps going up. What's going on here? And then you launch an investigation and you find out that the tech sec or the course room supervisor or somebody else is just making up numbers. Happened all the time. The reason it would happen all the time was singular, though. There was always only one reason. Because if your statistic is reported down, you're going to be in trouble. And people don't want to be in trouble in Scientology churches. Because I mentioned discipline of having to write down your, sins or confess your sins and that kind of thing. That's the lightest of the disciplinary actions that could be taken against you if your statistics go down and stay down. 1 week, you're not going to get severe reprimands and, everybody hating on you. Okay. It's not going to be just because of 1 week. But if you can't get your stats up, or you're running into some real problems or issues, or you're generally trending downward, like maybe you've had some stellar weeks, but then it's kind of trending downward, you're producing less and less and less, you're going to be regarded as what's called an ethics particle. You're going to be ethics bait, as Hubbard calls it. Ethics is going to get really interested in you. And when they get really interested in you, you're in a lot of trouble. That means sleepless nights. That means scrubbing the bathroom with a toothbrush. That means, standing around at 2 a.m. trying to generate some income by calling people in New Zealand or something. Depending on the statistic, you got to get creative about what you're going to do to get it up, because being down again isn't going to be acceptable, and we're going to keep punishing you until you figure out how to get your statistic up. In short, that's why it happens, and it happens a lot.
Just imagining that related to my old job doing fulfillment for a department store. Just walking around shopping for people all day. I can only move so fast when I'm shopping without running around and causing accidents with my cart.
That's right.
I'm just imagining if
you're not in charge, and you're also not in charge of how many orders are coming in, right?
Correct.
That has nothing to do with you. You have no control over how many people are ordering products, right? Just like a course room supervisor has no control over how many people are coming into his course room. The people who get new people in are in a whole nother division. The people who sign them up and get them to pay for courses are in a whole nother division. They have no control over that. So the supervisor stands in an empty course room and is told, it's your fucking fault, asshole. Get some students in here. But it's not his job to go sign up students, and it's not his job to go sell raw books to bring new people in. So what is that course room supervisor supposed to do when there's nobody there?
wouldn't you think there would be some level of fight back against executives or management because of these differing not points of view but differing posts and stuff? You like if so say for example you're the course soup and you've got that issue. Why can't it make sense to be like, hey, the people that I'm supposed to be getting in, I'm not getting in because the people who are supposed to be getting them in aren't doing their fucking jobs right.
Yeah,
How
see,
hard
that's
is it
why
to
it's
say
God,
that
isn't
and
it?
just be like,
That's the why it's
common
God.
sense? What the fuck?
Nope. Why is God? If you can't do something to get your own statistic up, you're just giving me excuses. It's an unreasonable position. It is wholly irrational. I am not at all arguing that this makes any sense, but it is how Scientology churches are run. And it is probably, if I'm being honest, this one thing that we're talking about right now is probably the number one reason why Scientology fails and is shrinking. They don't know how to run themselves as an organization. They don't know how to work together to get productive things done. They honestly, truly do not know how to do that. I worked for that organization for 25 years. They do not have their shit together. And this whole statistic thing is one big, huge reason why. It's huge. It's a gigantic reason why they fail.
So now I'm just
their priorities are all out of whack. They're micromanaged and micro-focused on numbers on a graph on a wall. And that is what they produce, not people or caring about people or working for people. It's not about people. It's about numbers on a graph on a wall.
so then
That is the staff experience.
So then wouldn't that mean that the executive that is running that org, the executive, say ED or the secretaries, whatever, then wouldn't that mean that they're not doing their jobs right if they're coming after people for jobs that they're not supposed to be fucking doing? Doesn't that mean they need cramming now? But I'm assuming that doesn't fucking apply to them because they're high up in their management, so everything's your fucking fault, as you said. But it's like, by having this way of thinking about it, you are failing at your own job by not understanding the org board below you.
Tell me that in a different way. I'm not quite sure I'm tracking.
Like, again, you course soup, low amount of students coming in, or just no students at all.
Yep.
Wouldn't that indicate, and then they come after you for saying, hey, get your stats up, all that stuff. Wouldn't that indicate a failure on management's part to understand the different posts of the organizing board below them? And so then wouldn't they need to get crammed? Wouldn't they need to get corrections and all that stuff? But do they?
Yes. Sometimes. EDs, executives of Scientology organizations, get crammed all the time. If anybody has a priority on cramming, it's them. Them and the auditors, by the way. The auditors are in cramming all the time. Okay, there's a lot of attention on auditor perfection. And so they're in cramming all the time. Executives, probably next in line. There are many, many other problems with Scientology churches and management function beyond the statistical pressures that answer your question as to why executives are so hamstrung or incompetent at running the organization as a whole. One of the things is the very structure of the organization itself, the 7-division or 9-division, depending on how you think about it. That system is an interesting system, but ultimately not the best way to organize people. 2, the policies of the church are stringent and arbitrary. There are things that you cannot do without management authorization or without some other permission given that hamstring the executive directors and the executives of Scientology churches at the local level from being able to do things that are very common sense that would expand and blow open the organization. There's a lot of control You know, we talk about all the control that's exerted against Scientologists as individuals. It's the same with the organizations. They are so tightly held in this micromanagement grip by management, that the Sea Org management, that they don't have the freedom or power of choice to make the decisions and actually be responsible, even though they're held responsible. This is another one of the major conflicts in Scientology organizations. And by this, I mean, the executive directors are not only expected to run their organizations on a week to week, on a day to day, hour to hour. I mean, the statistical policies on this are clear. It is micromanagement central. That's baked into the policies. That's a non-starter right there, right? Because you just drive everybody fucking crazy because you say they're responsible for their job, but then you don't give them the power to be responsible. The executives are receiving literally piles. If I had a paper to represent every order that went into an org every week by the management, it'd be reams. There'd be piles of paper here.
Your pending basket would be up to the ceiling.
Oh, it often was. There are piles of orders being sent down to the staff of these churches by the management. The structure of Scientology literally violates the management principles of Scientology. It is that crazy. Okay. I made a video many years ago breaking down the management structure and explaining this because it's kind of complicated, but it's just nuts. Too many orders, too much compressed time, too little power given to the people who need it to get their jobs done, and punishment for not exerting the power that they should be exerting to get their jobs done. You see the contradictions, right?
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Exactly. And there is not one person who ever works for Scientology who doesn't twig on that eventually. They're not, oh, I see what's going on here, right? and then you have to go, well, shit. And then you have to reconcile, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to deal with these contradictions? How am I going to deal with this insanity that they call organization in Scientology? And every single person, depending on their gifts and intelligence and everything else, right, and circumstances, figures out how to cope with and manage their way through this and get something done despite all this bullshit.
They get something
And that's
done.
what I really mean when what's that?
I said they get something done, but is it the thing they actually need to get done, or is it filler?
Whatever they can do, right? As a supervisor, I got people through courses, right? I got people through their auditing steps. It was never easy. It was hardly ever fun. I mean, sometimes we had people finishing their courses on Wednesday night at 4 a.m, and and I'm there, and a couple other staff have to stay until that late, for this poor schlep to get through his course. Why? Because I need a number on a wall.
That push.
Not because exactly, it's called a stat push. Exactly right, and that's Scientology, right? That's how they run things. It sounds crazy. It is crazy. I don't know how believable it is, but it's true, and that's why they don't expand. And they never will. This is one of the key reasons why Scientology is not really a worldwide threat. It's never gonna get past itself.
It's its own statistical ceiling.
It really is.
Wow.
It really is. And then you add the abuse and the physical trauma and nonsense that goes on, from the top down, and the shit that rolls downhill from Miscavige, who is one of the most incompetent executives on this planet. He is so bad at his job because he could correct all of this. He actually could. He could pull it off. He could change all of this. He doesn't know how. He literally doesn't know how.
But if he does, it contradicts Hubbard's original writings, and people are going to pick up on that shit.
Basically, he has managed to change some very interesting things in Scientology, but he can't change that much. And so in that way, he is sort of saddled with this. It's really, there's the writings of Scientology and there's the reality of Scientology. And the writings don't make sense. They sound like they do, but they really don't. Which is why the reality of Scientology is so crazy, because it really is a bunch of people doing their damnedest. So sincere. These are such sincere people. I wish people knew, right? How much these people want to help, how much they want to do a good job, and how much they want to see a better world. But I think I've, sort of in my mangled way here, tried to describe at least some of the barriers and things they run into that they can't do anything about. And they're stuck in that system, and it's a fucked up system. And it's never going to change. Can't. So, yeah.
Quick question.
Good
How
times,
much time
huh?
do you have left? Because I'm going to be honest, I still have a lot of questions, and I don't know if we need to go to part 2.
No, let's do a part 2, because I'm a little talked out right now, and I got stuff I got to do. So why don't we? Is that cool?
Yep, that works for me. I will send you a list of the questions I have, so you can maybe easily prepare for them.
Great
I should
idea.
have done that.
Should have. I could have prepped better.
Either
Thank
way,
you.
though, getting your raw reactions to it, and your even just you trying to put your thoughts together and picking from all these different places in your memory, it helps to put a bigger picture together than it would if you just wrote out all your answers and read them to me.
Sure.
And I think that makes this way more informative, way more helpful.
Cool. All right. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris Shelton, for joining me here today for statistical management. And we will be doing a part 2 in the future, at least I hope.
We will.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. Like, subscribe, do the normal bullshit. I hate having to ask y'all. But, all right, I will talk to all of you later. Peace out.
Bye.